Okay, hi. Thank you all for coming today. Thank you for the lovely introduction. So yes, as you can see, my research topic was the northeast of Scotland's contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals. But, okay. Technical difficulties as per usual. Okay, there we go. Tiny hiccups in the beginning. So, some might ask, okay, how did my master dissertation journey begin? Let's take you a little bit back in time to March this year. All of my colleagues and I were faced with the decision to find a topic that is interesting enough for us to cope with for the next 5 months without completely losing our minds. Of course, it would be as well quite nice if it would help us with our career after university. So the project that Aberdeen for a Fair World pretty much suggested, I was instantly like, yes, this is the project for me, even though I was from the get-go aware that it would be a bit of a time-intensive task. I was up for the challenge. However, nobody could have prepared me for how difficult it actually turned out to be. How many challenges I faced and how many rather questionable choices I had to make. So here's the main research aim in focus. I ended up selecting the aim, utilizing the SDGs to map out the impact of activities that organizations across Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire have on the local community, the environment, and the society at large, as well as suggest certain improvements. So now I would like to go and explain a bit the topic relevancy and the importance. So that we're all on the same page, and then I can discuss what I found out. So we're all aware that currently we are all facing a multitude of modern challenges. Unprecedented loss of biodiversity, extreme levels of pollution, climate change, geopolitical conflicts, and infectious diseases. This is why it is called the age of polycrises. The age of polycrisis is further intensified by extreme overpopulation in certain parts of the world and excessive consumerism in other parts. This is why radical transformations across all aspects of society are needed to avoid surpassing the planet's carrying capacity, and as well as to reduce social inequalities. We have to stop trying to become the first species that will be the cause of their own extinction. Some invested listeners might be asking right now, Lisa, how can we actually do this? How can we change the self-destructive way of living ingrained into every aspect of society? Should we just accept our inevitable demise and let it be? This is why the United Nations introduced the Sustainable Development Goals in 2015 to be achieved by 2030. It was a historic global consensus between all 193 states. The goals were supposed to guide society towards a sustainable future for people and planet by establishing partnership, prosperity, and peace for all. Guidelines are all split, as you can see, into 17 goals, with a total of 169 indicators sitting underneath it. They're being annually revised, so the number sometimes varies. But what does sustainable development even mean? Because when we take the two words apart, it kind of sounds like a contradiction in itself. The most commonly used definition was introduced by the United Nations Frontend Report 1987, and it reads as follows. Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. The vagueness of the definition settled international discourse towards an understanding that development is an essential need to be achieved with limited resources for all nations. This allowed for an international consensus, so everybody agreed what sustainable development means, as well as that they agreed that it would be the best long-term national aspiration through greening society and industry by balancing social, economic, and environmental needs. So, some of you might have noticed that the deadline of 2030 is not that far away anymore. The mathematicians in the crowd would probably say, yes, we have 4 years remaining. So let's take a look at how the world is doing currently. Where are we at? Are we on a good path towards transformational change? I'm really sorry to inform you, but unfortunately the answer is no. The SDGs Summit in 2023 paints a bit of a shocking picture of the current state of the Sustainable Development Goals. Of all targets, only 15% are on course. Over 50% are inadequately pursued, and 30% are stagnant or in decline. So, what must happen that we still manage to achieve the goals by 2030? Some might say miracle. But technically speaking, the answer is rather simple. All global, national, and local stakeholders from public, private, and third sector must work in partnership and accelerate their efforts. Simple answer, but we probably all agree that the implementation is a bit of the issue. So, due to the project's main focus, let's take a look at how the United Kingdom is performing and reporting against the Sustainable Development Goals. The picture that you see here is pretty much a summary of the voluntary national review that every country that signed up to try and achieve the SDGs has to do at least once during the 15-year period. So, as you can see, only SDG 9 is in the color green, which means only this has been identified as an achieved goal. The rest is ranking from major challenges remain in red to moderately improving in yellow. With an international rank of 11, the United Kingdom is one of the best performing countries regarding the SDGs and one that reports the most, which then, as you might agree with them just reporting towards 74% of indicators, is a bit of a shocking realization and kind of underlines the immense shortcomings and data gaps that still persist. Then let's look at Scotland. Scotland embedded the SDGs since their introduction in 2015 in the National Performance Framework, also called NPF. They conducted their own voluntary national review with 81 country-specific indicators. The Scottish SDG adaptation appreciates that not only global SDG measures are relevant in the Scottish context. For example, SDG 1. What has been identified by the United Nations as extreme poverty is not evident as such in Scotland, so it had to be adjusted to the context, which doesn't mean that poverty doesn't exist in the UK, just how it is identified across the globe is not there. Then, lastly, let's review how or if the local councils in Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire have adopted the SDGs. 12 councils created their own local outcome improvement plan, which is a mouthful, and this is why it is being shortened to LOIPs. And it aims to deliver solutions for the problem areas identified in the population needs assessment. It categorized their objectives and their actions by utilizing the 3 pillars of sustainability: economy, people, and planet. So economic, social, and environmental. The LOIPs can be interpreted as the localized adaptation of the SDGs in Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire. However, no clear reference was ever made. And the only time when the SDGs are being mentioned in either one of the LOIPs is just as an additional source. So, the localization of the SDGs. What must happen to successfully localize the SDG framework? Ready would identify it as the process of defining, implementing, and monitoring strategies at a local level. It should involve the entire local context, meaning it has to include the private, public, and third sector. And they should all be involved in the consultation process and agree upon how to actually practically implement the SDGs. Localization makes the global framework relevant for local stakeholders. Any form of positive development must start locally, and the local context is imperative to achieve the goals and should no longer be ignored, how it has been ignored in the BNRs of the UK and partially of Scotland. So, some might ask now, okay, so why should we then utilize the SDG framework when it is not really working out and it doesn't seem like it's going anywhere? I will try and convince you guys that it is a good thing. And yeah. So, why would an SDG mapping exercise be beneficial for local organizations? Firstly, again, it kind of makes a local organization understand how they fit within the grand scheme of a global framework. It also assists in standardizing progress reporting, which again can fill the persistent data gaps that remain in the VNRs. And it provides you with an overview of the existing activities in your own organization and when the network works out everywhere else. And this can highlight underserved issues and identify useful partnerships and improve the already existing positive impact and hopefully mitigate the negative ones. It also translates into linkages between sustainable issues into a concise and simple narrative, which again can inspire further sustainable action. The SDGs could also be utilized as a planning tool to prioritize and coordinate interconnected actions. It fosters better sustainable decision-making and encourages reassessment of current practices, such it can question the status quo and lead to a transformation of society. The National Performance Framework represents only a snapshot of the local efforts. So my research project was supposed to kind of highlight that the Northeast is more than just oil and gas. But of course, there must be a reason why a lot of people are not utilizing the SDGs. What might they be? Firstly, a really big shock was for me to realize that the level of awareness is still rather low. In 2024, a study was conducted and it turned out that only 8% of the British public have even a mediocre understanding of the SDGs. So on top of that, there are no local mandates kind of encouraging the engagement with the SDGs or any form of the adaptation. And yeah, the relevancy was just not communicated comprehensively nor consistently enough for people to engage with the framework. On top of that, the SDGs, as you can see, the way wording which caused the global consensus also causes the confusion, and again emphasizes that people do not really see themselves fit within this framework. On top of that, a lot of organizations are uncertain about how to measure their impact. So again, feel discouraged to engage with a framework like the SDGs. Additionally, there is no funding to even kind of encourage people to do a localization of the SDGs. So fair enough, why should anybody care? Also, some organizations have predating sustainability frameworks. So again, it's a question of money. And on top of that, the subjectivity and the counteractive nature of the SDGs makes it really hard to kind of find an in. Additionally, there are no local accountability schemes. And most importantly, when somebody kind of engages with the SDGs, it sometimes comes off more as a marketing tool where you kind of cherry pick the right SDGs. So it doesn't really encourage more sustainable action. And on top of that, sometimes it could be perceived as an attempt to greenwash certain things. So now that we have the theory finally out of the way, let's revisit the main research aim and the, unfortunately, many objectives that sit underneath it. As you can already kind of tell in the coloring and the wide scope of the project, I kind of decided to adopt a mixed methods approach. So to kind of get the first impression on how high are awareness levels and how or then do local organizations even engage with the SDGs as a mapping tool or other adaptations? And do they measure stuff? And just to get a first impression, I decided to conduct a questionnaire and with a focus on an activity table where I asked them to kind of assign the main benefiting SDG and other SDGs to see, is it easy to interact with it? Is it easy to apply it? And then to kind of get a more in-depth analysis of why people engage, not engage, why do we not measure against it? I did semi-structured interviews. So I knew pretty quickly how I wanted to collect my data. And after listening to me for a little bit, I think we all agree, sustainability development goals, good thing. It should be really not a difficult task to find participants to join in my project, right? Yes, I was really optimistic in the beginning as well. Unfortunately, life sometimes doesn't work out like that. So, yes. The most shocking thing, I suppose, was to find out that the SDGs are apparently a really controversial topic, which a lot of people do not want to engage with, no matter how much you beg them. And so how did I reach out to people? How did I try to communicate there would be a mutual benefit in contributing? So in total, I directly contacted like over 150 organizations, and let's ignore all the ones I just annoyed. And so I wrote ridiculous amount of emails. Some might say I became a bit pushy in the end. Then I posted on social media, begged other people to reshare it. I even started calling people, walking into offices, and some could call me a bit of a stalker at that moment in time, but you know, desperate times, desperate measures. I even designed a flyer so that I would just have something physical to give to people, which apparently is a unique approach. And so after doing all this, what else did I do? Let's just say not everything was bad about it. I told myself that to engage with local organizations, I have to go to all of these amazing events, right? For, you know, research purposes and stuff. And so let's just say that was probably the highlight of my dissertation. And I actually got a few people from these events. So it worked out in the end. But yeah, as I said, the struggles were rather high. So at one point, I had to constantly kind of revisit my goals, my objectives, to make it more realistic, more achievable in this really tight time frame we were all in, with a deadline always approaching. So, tiny question, how many people do you think actually ended up filling out the questionnaire and sending it back? Who thinks it was 107? Yes, I know. That was a bit of a far reach. Who believes 85 is the right answer? I'm not the optimist, thank you. How about 32? Because you know my project. So the room was aware that it was 32. And out of these, I ended up interviewing 24 of them, which some might call a bit insane. And yeah, I'm one of these people. I kind of regretted interviewing this many, but it was worth it in the end. So after this really, really long introduction, what have I really uncovered? So most spokespersons represented in the study were either slightly, moderately, or very knowledgeable with the Sustainable Development Goal framework. And only one representative was not familiar with the concept, which already sounds really promising, doesn't it? Then many representatives, in total like 13, agreed that the SDGs have motivated them to create more activities, more sustainable activities. And 9 of them, 9 spokespersons were kind of neutral towards the idea, which kind of suggests that on the one hand, they kind of see the potential in the SDGs being able to motivate more sustainable action, but it wasn't the right fit for their organization thus far. Several respondents also had rather extreme opinions towards the framework. Either they kind of extremely agreed or disagreed, which again emphasizes the surprisingly controversial nature of such a peaceful framework in a way. And this graph kind of showcases you a combination, how aware were people with the different, with the different frameworks, and how useful, practical do they find it. So 20 representatives identified the SDG framework as rather useful, practical, by giving them ratings between 5 and 8 when creating new activities. The minority, just 2, perceived it as a step-by-step guide. Everybody else kind of ranked it much lower. Unexpectedly, close to half of the respondents, 16, were unfamiliar with the National Performance Framework, the Scottish SDG adaptation. And many were unaware of any of the LOIPs, the local outcome improvement plans of the 2 councils. This kind of suggests that the Scottish government and the local authorities completely failed to raise framework awareness and did not manage to communicate any sort of local relevancy. Aware organizations were kind of indecisive regarding the usefulness and practicality of the NPF and the LOIPs. This all just kind of suggests that there should be a reassessment of the NPF and the LOIPs. So another question was, how aware are local organizations of the activity streams of other local organizations? Awareness of most, meaning really 31 people, ranged from not at all aware to somewhat aware. So it kind of was in between 1 and 5. Meaning my research project had some relevancy because nobody knew anything about the activity streams. And above average knowledge the few that were really knowledgeable about the local activity stream, admitted that in the interview phase that it was mostly connected because it was part of their job description. This word cloud kind of showcases what people said in the questionnaire, how they measure, which metrics they use to measure their impact. And the size of the words kind of showcases how many times certain things were said. So you can see that attendance, surveys, activity-specific metrics, and verbatim feedback were used as the most common metrics to measure impact. This kind of suggests, again, that most organizations utilize rather simplistic form measurement metrics, which explains the persistent data gaps. And one question was, do organizations kind of consider negative implications of their activities, like, in the planning process or afterwards? 13 representatives kind of said this is not part of the way they judge their activities. 3 emphasized strongly that they find this task rather irrelevant, but gladly the majority of organizations, 18, did consider potential trade-offs when planning activities or evaluating their impact. Most were, however, not prompted by the SDG framework, and none where they utilized to identify the trade-offs of their activities. So as you can see here, this is kind of a summary of all the activities that I have recorded. The really detailed list, which is like make my master dissertation far too long, is part of the appendices if somebody's interested. But this summary kind of allowed me to identify, as you can see, like either if there's no activity at all, like SDG 6, or where there is a lot of coverage in the past and in the present. I nearly recorded 300 past and current activities from 39 representatives of 32 organizations. The reason why there's a bit of a discrepancy there is because some organizations were so vast that it felt appropriate to have more representatives. As you can see, SDG 3, 4, 10, and 13 received the most attention. And the existing gaps are SDG 1, 2, 5, 6, 9, and 14. Based on the local challenges that Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire is facing, I did suggest that SDG 1, 2, 3, 8, and 11 should still kind of get more attention because the challenges do still persist. So then after my interviews, I kind of came up with this categorization framework of the organizations that kind of emerged from the data that I analyzed. All 24 organizations have had a positive attitude towards the general benefits of the SDGs. Thus, the categorization is based on if their activities are aligned with the SDG framework or other sustainable development sustainability frameworks. And if they are planning to align with any of them in the future. As you can see, only 6 of the 24 organizations have actively aligned their activity stream with the Sustainable Development Goals. Thus, I called them the SDG champions. The rest either utilized other schemes, the open-minded sustainability advocates, do not find the mapping exercise useful for their organizations, but see a benefit in it. These are the supportive skeptics, or have been inspired by participating in the project to consider future alignment and future engagement and future discussions, which are the open-minded newcomers. Moreover, 13 organizations have had enough awareness of the Sustainability Development Goal framework And interesting enough, they actively decided to not align and to not work with it. And here is just I just clicked through it. So this is just a tiny summary of the vast amount of qualitative data that I collected. So all organizations were willing to utilize the SDG framework as a common way of communicating and identifying partnerships, as well as inspiring further sustainable action. Local SDG engagement mostly was seen as inexplicable and coincidental. And the main engagement barriers, kind of aligning with the research I did, is kind of the lack of resources, relevancy, the number of goals is too overwhelming, and the requirement. The participation motivated some organizations to start the sustainability engagement, and with one of the organizations I even did a brainstorming exercise where we kind of did it all together. It was a 2-hour workshop, which I really enjoyed, and kind of made it more visual, and people just finally started to see the SDGs as something worth looking into. But however, the SDGs were not identified by anyone as a starting point. The SDGs do not motivate you to start creating new activities specifically aiming towards achieving them. So as you can say, it doesn't really inspire sustainable action. Also, the biggest issue was that the impact was measured insufficiently, with the main barriers being that they just don't have the funds or the know-how to kind of measure the data, thus data is missing, data gaps remain, and again, the vagueness of the SDGs, that people are just confused to like what kind of impact does it even match. And the acknowledgement of various benefits was really great, that everybody kind of agreed, yes, we should all use it as a general mapping tool, and it does provide kind of a scheme that gives you a common language, and it concentrates the focus and strategy, and it does spark the thinking process. It might not directly create an action, but at least it brings you on the way towards one. Everybody kind of acknowledged the importance of grassroots initiatives, and the importance that you need the local context to transform society for the better. To increase the SDG engagement, the communication must improve, and a balanced approach between mandates and voluntary guidelines found. Everybody from the third, public and private sector was seen as accountable for having to be part of the transformational change. However, a lot of people acknowledge that the public sector should take the lead and mandate further engagement from the others. So, to summarize, I managed to create a network between 32 organizations from all sectors. The general level of awareness and engagement with the SDGs and other adaptations were recorded. An in-depth engagement and measurement barriers were uncovered. What can we conclude from the findings? Overall, some level of SDG framework awareness is present. The SDGs are not a starting point when planning new activities. The direct alignment is rare, and awareness levels do not derive from national nor local SDG adaptations. Awareness levels remain low, and many find them impractical and useless, the local national adaptations. The localized versions of the SDGs were not consistently nor comprehensively communicated as contextualized interpretations of the SDGs. The many issues that local organizations had with engaging with the SDGs could have been solved with a real, relevant, relational, relatable, local, national SDG adaptation. Everybody agreed that the SDGs would be a good tool to find common language, common ground, and form beneficial partnerships. Nevertheless, local organizations feel overwhelmed by the overabundance of frameworks and unstable political context. I kind of split up the recommendations in two parts. The first part is kind of supposed to suggest what local organizations can do to start or improve the SDG framework alignment and contribution. All of these recommendations are based on case studies, staff interviewees, and theoretical frameworks. So the utilization of SDGs within all marketing activities is encouraged so that people get more used to the terminologies used. There should be the investigation of best practice cases, with my research project kind of providing an initial list if somebody is interested. For example, Copenhagen's city council created a sustainability guide that is supposed to kind of help any person, any organization that would like to organize an event to type in the details, and you can try and reduce your ecological footprint with the checklist that this program then creates for you. And or that some organizations should look into kind of introducing sustainability ambassadors. So you have one person that is responsible for implementing or engaging with the SDGs, which has been identified as the main reason for success of the Bristol strategy, which is one of the highest performing councils towards contributing to the SDG framework. And a prioritization of specific SDGs could be kind of encouraged to get into the framework, but it should not be continued because then we have the cherry picking issue again. And yeah, I clicked a little bit too early. This is kind of the brainstorming exercise that I was talking about, which has shown that this is a really nice way of getting people thinking, kind of seeing the interlinkages. Yes, it looks a little bit like a mess, but it was still fun. And just gets people talking, gets people thinking. And SDGs should be utilized as a communication tool to kind of secure more funding, because you can utilize the terminology to better kind of to make the unique selling point of your activity more apparent. And more local organizations should be encouraged to join this project, because this is supposed to be, technically speaking, just the beginning. And it is encouraged that activities towards SDG 4, better education, SDG 17, partnership, that this should be fostered the most because it has the most positive impact to all the other SDGs. And the lack of SDG 5, like inequality, should be investigated to avoid that inequality is being ignored in the local context. And then some recommendations for, technically speaking, the local authorities and the Scottish government to kind of increase engagement and awareness with the framework. The LOIPs should not continue to be communicated as separate to the Sustainable Development Goals, and direct alignment should be performed. Like the Scottish government and local authorities should synchronize their framework communication efforts to kind of reduce the confusion, to make it clear that everybody's kind of working towards the same thing, so people are not overwhelmed by the vast amount of frameworks anymore. And funding schemes should consistently require a commentary towards the SDGs. And the LOIPs, like when they are being reviewed, should probably invite more representatives from local organizations to make it more relevant to them and listen. And it should be considered that there should be like a SDG education program to get the level of awareness higher and turn awareness into SDG literacy. Moreover, access to computer programs and training in them should be encouraged, because this will actually help to improve the standardized data and to kind of improve international data comparability and reduce the data gaps that still persist. The research project categorization framework that I designed could be utilized by the local authority to kind of decide what customized help each organization needs in the most cost-effective way. So, final thoughts. The SDG framework is, as we all probably know, it's not a perfect solution. Maybe there is none. They can, however, organize and make local, national, and global efforts more consistent and cost-effective to avoid the seemingly inevitable doom that humanity is currently facing. And the project represents a starting point for recognizing and translating the various efforts of the northeast of Scotland into a commonly understood framework. Please do continue to share with one another the activities and encourage more local organizations to join in. We still got time, and together we can do our part in transitioning towards a better future. And now I just would like to take the time and just say thank you to all the organizations that helped make this project possible. It was hard to find you and convince you, but I managed in the end. And I want to say thank you, of course, to my partnership and everybody else who listened to my annoying discussions and read my stuff. Thank you, and hi, Mama.